Hi, I'm Jason Grover for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to talk about this little album.
Shelf.
So, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Yeah, no, there's a lot to be said about this. It's arguably the biggest selling record of all time, depending on how you actually do the math and what counts as a full record. Basically, every song on it became a single. This is back when music sales were in the gazillions. I understand people like Taylor Swift have taken over the Billboard charts, but the charts are obviously very different now. Everything's very different now. Everything was different in the 80s. Deal is, Michael Jackson came out with Thriller. Really interesting time for those that were not around in the 80s. Completely transformed the way that actually pop music behaved. Certainly broke the barriers of seeing African Americans on pop television, which was the main way, the more visual way of actually apprehending music back then in Canada, Much Music, but definitely in the States on MTV. And this record really fundamentally shifted the perception of so much of what took place in terms of dance music, in terms of the use of synthesizers and groove drums, the elements from disco and from early 1970s soul, incorporated in a pop which continues to this day. There's so much that derives from current contemporary pop that can be directly put back not only to the contributions that Michael Jackson had, but of course, the magnificent Quincy Jones that actually produced the record. The sort of big three Quincy Jones productions that he did with MJ after The Wiz, Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad, truly transformative sonic masterpieces. As much as you can say about Michael Jackson as an artist, divorced from any other considerations people may have, whether or not that's possible, I'll leave to you. We're simply going down that route. I will simply state unequivocally that in terms of the history of 20th century music, there are very few people, there's a handful of people that have shaped it so dramatically as Quincy Jones. Just an incredible titan of pop, jazz. The stuff that he did with Sinatra is incredible. The stuff that he did in the 60s, the soundtrack scores, the solo elements, the bringing the musicians together and making everything sound in a very particular way. And so it was truly the combination of this child star that became this truly epic, talented Michael Jackson, ironically on Epic Records. I don't know, coincidentally. Ironic in a more Settian way. You really have in Thriller the culmination, the sort of apotheosis of these two working together. As great as Bad is, and it's a fantastic record, Thriller really is that sort of touchstone. There are certainly better moments in Off the Wall. There's some extraordinary moments in Bad, but Thriller really is if you had one record to sort of showcase what was going on at that particular time, this was it. Now, there have been numerous releases of Thriller. Obviously, it first came out on vinyl back in the early 80s. This is my original copy. I believe this is a Canadian first pressing on Epic. Lest we forget that it was indeed a single record gatefold with the, one can't. I always wondered what the name of said little creature here was. Maybe that's the girl that he was going on about, the girl's mind. Who knows? But it's nice to have a little baby tiger kicking around. This is you can tell that it's an early pressing because it just says produced by Quincy Jones for Quincy Jones Production. Later pressings actually will have here produced by Michael Jackson as well. The record, again, I want to be starting something. Baby Be Mine, Girl's Mine, Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Human Nature, PYT, and The Lady of My Life. I believe it's PYT was never the single. One of these was not a single. Everything else showed up as a single. For 2 years, this record was everywhere. I remember watching the Thriller video directed by John Landis, another guy who's complicated, when it played on, I guess, ABC. And we sat around the television. We waited for this music video to actually premiere and watched it all. And it was absolutely the equivalent of standing in line for a big movie. This was, you just felt the world shifting every single time something happened with this record. And really, they just ran out of time. They just ended up pulling singles from the next record. Otherwise, every single song on this would have been released as a single and probably would have done very well. What is the nadir of this record? I mean, even The Girl's Mine, which is schmaltzy as hell, has incredible bridge, and so, Paul's singing great. Michael's in absolutely fine form. So yeah, it's a completely ridiculous song, but only compared to the bloody masterpieces on this. Want to be starting something incredible groove. What a remarkable track. Billie Jean. Human Nature is obviously probably the most 1980s of all the song. The incorporation of the synths and the way that it's actually constructed feels very much the era. But something like Billie Jean, with that driving, incredible drum performance, borrowed from the original demos, of course, the drum machine, but the human drumming on that is so bloody extraordinary. Of course, Thriller, the astonishing elements that Vincent Price has. It's just an incredible album. It's an album that you just almost don't listen to enough because it was so played and so, frankly, overplayed that you just sort of take it for granted. I mean, in some ways, it's sort of like synchronicity from a similar time. It's just when you actually sit down and listen to it, and you listen to the songs, you're like, oh yeah, no, it was really, really good. Why do we love this enough? Anyway, so there's my sort of first Canadian Thriller, and I just put this on my, not the system I had back in the early 80s when this came out. The 1982, I guess this would have been sort of somewhere around December 82, I guess, is when this would have been purchased, a Hanukkah present. You can see it has Gorber here, written by my mother. This sounds incredible. This version, the first pressing, a Bernie Grumman cut actually, just absolutely fantastic. Everything sounds great. It's just in your face. Here we are, a 40-ish year old record, completely slamming on contemporary systems. It's a beautiful pressing, beautiful recording, beautiful engineering, and for a while you could buy this for like $1. Right, when people are purging, this is the most sold record of all time, and it's probably the most thrown out record of all time, because when people were purging their vinyl collections, this was in there, therefore it got turfed. I mean, this, Rumors, all kinds of records just got dumped that are now, silly versions that you can actually get of all of these. But yeah, putting this on sort of as part of something that I hadn't done in quite some time, and I was, it's so extraordinary how good this sounds. Now, why am I bothering listening to it? Well, because something came out, and that's this guy. So this is the Mobile Fidelity One Step on the VR900, not 9000, the VR900 vinyl compound, their Supervinyl compound. This is the cute little mini box that they have now, instead of the sort of pull-off cardboard boxes. Big sticker on the front that tells a story. MoFi Ultra Disc One Step 1 Special Audiophile Edition, limited to 40,000 units. This one's 17,000 something. Ridiculous. Half-inch 30 IPS analog master. 2 DSD 256. 2 analog console to the lathe. Okay. So we've had other videos about that. People are still freaking out about it. I am on record multiple times of saying I actually think this is a great idea. This is the record that sort of made people actually question, how are you going to do a one step? How are you going to run the tape? If you're only getting 500 copies per one step, and watch many other videos where I actually talk about the one step, basically removing a layer of pressing so that you're going basically straight from the lacquer to a pressing master, almost, without doing a sort of intermediate in between, which adds hypothetically greater audio quality, but it does mean that you are limited the number of times you have to run a master tape to run a new lacquer each time. If you're actually doing that with the tape, you're going to wear out the tape, and Sony's not going to want that very much. So instead, what they do is they go to the master tape. They're very adamant about it. That's what it says. Half-inch 30% analog master, the actual, in this case, half-inch tape. They run that through their proprietary digital audio converter, and create a digital file. That digital file is not edited, it is not truncated, it stays in the DSD domain. It is a DSD 256 equivalent of the master tape, and according to many, many mastering engineers, sounds sonically identical to simply playing back the tape. A to B, they hear no difference. Clearly, when you start futzing with digital files or analog files, you're going to hear differences. But what they do is they basically play back that digital file through the same analog board that they have been using for X number of years. In other words, all that's changed is what's playing back through the board. There's no digital futzing or digital EQ. Sometimes that can be good, sometimes it can be bad. There's no tweaking of the file, there's no editing it, there's none of that. They're simply hitting play and then doing all of their analog mixing the way that they would traditionally at Mobile Fidelity. This has freaked the hell out of a bunch of people. For me, it is, again, I'm on record saying I think it's extraordinary because it allows us now to do once an incredible, very high resolution, very powerful version of a digital safety master. That digital equivalent master, the DSD 256, then can be for generations made whatever records you want, whatever mastering you want to do. You want to go through an analog board, you want to go to digital board, you want to make other DSDs, you want to make WAV files, you want to make MP3s, you want to recompress it, you want to add whatever the hell you want to do afterwards. It's fine because we have this master that we can go back to. We have this thing that is not going to deteriorate like the analog tape will continue to deteriorate. In 10, 15, 20, 50 years, that tape is going to be useless. But what isn't going to be useless is that digital file, that DSD file, which will be forever, for all intents and digital purposes, the best version that we have of a replication of the original analog tape. And that's why this is kind of extraordinary, because if you compare this to this, what you're hearing isn't the difference between analog and digital. You're hearing the difference in taste, in the taste of what Bernie Grumman and the mastering engineers wanted to do with this version versus this version. If you really want to get in the weeds, Grumman cut this like 6 or 7 times. He kept changing the mix. It was being done. It was all analog. It was still running the tape all the time, but they changed compression levels. They changed EQ. They changed all kinds of stuff. So different versions of Thriller sound different. Different pressings sound different. There is no one master original first pressing of Thriller that sort of stands the way that it's meant to. Some people like later versions of this that are a little bit more punchy. Grumman's on record saying a lot that, he continued to do it. He's also super pissed he didn't get to do this, but that's another story. That's sort of the internal stuff that comes with it going. But what we have here is a very different treatment of the mix. In a funny way, this will sound probably a heck of a lot more like the master tape than this does. This was meant to be, it's essentially a club record. It is compressed. The instruments are all intertwined. You hear everything as this sort of punch in your face, and it's amazing. It's so fantastic. Such an incredible way of listening to this. This is the sit back and listen in your room, in your crazy setup room, and hear every little bit, not isolated, but you can certainly hear the soundstage in a much more precise and articulate way. This feels like everything is on. It's incredibly stereo, but this is sort of the spirit of what good mono mixes are, that everything is sort of cooperating and everything's carving out a little bit of space, but it's all kind of occupying the same sort of dimensionality. Whereas this, you truly feel like you're entering the world of this record and hearing the intricate tiny little guitar parts, the little accents, the little bits that Quincy and his collaborators and the studio musicians, incredible studio musicians and songwriters sort of contributed. This is a way of getting into the DNA of this record. This is a way of sort of diving deeply into what this record is constituted by. This is the original way that they thought of it, and this is the way that you have of looking at this in a different light, through a magnifying glass, through being able to sort of strip away certain layers and actually peer much deeper into the mix. Some things benefit from that, some things don't. What if you starting something on this is an onslaught? Like, it just kicks you in the face. It's pretty amazing. On this, it loses a little bit of that impact, but instead you get a little bit more clarity. But take something like Beat It, which is already a relatively spare track. you really feel more space between the drums, the synth line, the vocal, where the vocal presentation is, where Michael Jackson actually sits in the sort of dimensional space that's created by your sound system, and you get this immersion into the production. It is like suddenly you're being able to see the special effects in a way that you weren't before. Sometimes those weren't meant to be seen. Sometimes those things were meant to sort of blend into the background and all become sort of a wash of sound, compressed, not in the digital compression sort of way, like compressing to MP3 and losing data, but the lows being brought up and the highs sort of being tamed, so everything's sort of occupying the same relative sonic amplitude. Whereas this, the dynamics are much greater. The delicacy of certain moments are allowed to sort of remain in their space while other things are there. I found myself adjusting the volume a lot on this in a way I was not with this, because this, you set it and forget it. Some of the tracks are certainly louder than others in terms of impact. I don't think if you pulled out the SPL, sound pressure level meter, that there would be a dramatic difference just in terms of the sound. Some things you just wanted to sort of eke up a little bit, and some things you wanted to do down. That's why God invented volume controls. Nonetheless, I think I love that I have options, that I still have, this dollar bin worthy record still sounds fantastic. The vinyl pressing in this is obviously extraordinarily great. It is 33 RPM. I would love them to do a 45 RPM. They're probably inevitably going to do one, and I will end up buying it because I'm a lunatic. I think some of the tracks, especially where the bass is now given sort of an opportunity to be more rich and more sort of robust, which truly shine at 45 RPM. And you truly hear the dynamic between those moments where it is a drum machine versus a live drummer, where you actually feel the sort of 8-bitness of some of that drum machine nonsense. Again, here we have digital to analog, whatever way we want to look at it. We have instruments that are recorded that have relatively low fidelity that are put in incredibly high fidelity idiom, and it's how does it sound in the end is all we're worried about, and how we think it sounds is extraordinary. So inside this tiny little box thing, you get not much. You don't get that sort of one-step story anymore. You get the usual MoFi fake version of the cover. It's not sort of pressed on non-glossy cardstock that gives an example of what the original gatefold was. You do get on thicker cardstock the original lyric sheet as was included, and you get one of these inners, the black and gold single inner, and inside this we have just the protection instead of the catalog, and then you have the record in, of course, a MoFi sleeve. And this is it'll be difficult to see, you probably can't see me through it a little bit, but this is the translucent vinyl. There are, because of the VR900, the Supervinyl, because it's translucent, it actually shows off like imperfections in a way that regular vinyl tends to sort of hide. So there's certainly some surface blotching and other elements, but I cleaned out my degrader, I played it, I heard absolutely no issue whatsoever. Compared directly to, I said this in my Rolling Stones video, compared to the original JVC Supervinyl, I'm a little suspicious of this. It doesn't quite live up to what we had back in the day with the JVC, but I think that it is definitely a sweet sounding record, relatively low surface noise, and really allows the punch and the impact of the record. So there we are, our look at Michael Jackson's little film. It is a film in some ways. It's a musical movie on album form. But here's our look at Thriller by Michael Jackson, available on One Step from Mobile Fidelity. Yes, it went through a DST process. Yes, you should buy it if you decide that you want to blow a couple $100 in a record, which again was available in a dollar bin. This truly is, I don't even know if it's the best version, but it's certainly a version to own of one of the most extraordinary albums ever made. And it's certainly a unique presentation that I think truly allows you to dive even deeper into this record. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on social media, and we will see you in the next video. All the best. Take care.